Hello, everyone. It's Halloween, or at least, the month of Halloween, October. And so I figure if I'm ever going to talk about this, now's the time to do it. So, yeah, as you may or may not know, I don't know. Actually, everyone would be new to this since this channel is new. I am chronically ill, and very chronically ill, which is, part of what this channel is built off of and from and around. I'm trying to get my art projects done before I pass away, or before I become homeless. Honestly, I would rather pass away than become homeless, because to be chronically ill and homeless, that would equal me being automatically arrested, because it's now illegal to be homeless in all of the US, in all the counties, in all the states, in all the US now. So that's not good. Apparently, if you're hiding out in any kind of a building at all, you're safe and fine. But as long as you're out in the open, you're automatically homeless and you can be arrested for that. So that's interesting. It's like they want people hiding out inside buildings and whatnot instead of enjoying nature, which I don't like at all, but still. Anyway, to get on to my point, I've been chronically ill basically my whole life. It started, kind of like childhood diabetes starts. It started basically at the age of 10 and a half for me. And it has been lifelong, and it has gotten worse. I'm really debating how much I should really mention in this video. I am wanting to do a general overview of everything, so I might as well just start in on it. So yeah, I've had colon cancer, I've had kidney cancer. They're now wanting to say that I have breast cancer. I've learned my lesson that it doesn't matter what the doctors say. And this, if I can't impart anything else to, everyone out there, especially women, but the rest of the world, I definitely want to impart this. You know your body better than any doctor does. So if they say that you're perfectly fine, but you feel lousy, you're sick, then you're sick. If a doctor says that you're sick, but you feel perfectly fine, then guess what? You're perfectly fine, literally. And I will never back down from that opinion. Actually, fact that I had to learn the hard way. And if a doctor says that some drug is making you better, but it's making you sick, then do whatever you can, if it's possible at all, to stop taking that drug, and vice versa. If some drug is not doing a single thing for you, or it's making you better, but the doctor says it's making you worse, or it's, who knows what he might, and it's always a he might say, literally, listen to your body. That's the whole point. Literally, if some drug is making you sick, stop it. If some drug is making you feel better, continue it. I don't care what it is. Literally. So, and I've also found out that the medical community is out there to make money, and specifically off of, even lower middle class people, anyone who has the ability to even partially pay their bills, or at least that's the way it was, in the 90s, especially, and early 2000s, all the way up to about 2010, 2000, basically 2010. 2010 is when everything got cut off like cold turkey for everything. So, and if you hear some noises in the background, that's my guts. I can't control it. It's just the way it is. Sorry. So, yeah, I've been through a lot. And because of that, I have had, I've also been wrongly, diagnosed as having Parkinson's disease by 3 different doctors. So I'm not even, so I've had neurological shaking, and, what finally got correctly diagnosed as seizures, and migraines. Interesting. But it's like, I even told the doctor, you can't have migraines and seizures at the same time. It's impossible. That's what the medical community has decided. And, she just said, well, you clearly do have both, and it's still an extremely gray area. We don't understand neurology, and we don't understand seizures or migraines, so you clearly have both. So I was like, oh, great. So anyway, I've been through a lot. Clearly, I've been through a whole lot. And if I can impart anything to anyone. It's trust your body. No doctor and no outside entity, whether it be a parent who gave birth to you, whether it be a best friend, whether it be a soulmate, no one is going to know your body better than you. Period. I don't care. No one, no one, no one. You know your body better than anyone else at all, whatsoever. Literally, whatsoever. In fact, I would trust, from my experiences and what I have encountered at this point, I would, believe that one psychic that warned that one guy, that one actor that he was going to keel over from a heart attack. I would trust that one, was it Tyler Henry psychic, more than I would trust a doctor at this point, because I've been so harmed and screwed over by their quote treatments, unquote, and their quote cures, unquote. So anyway, I didn't mean for this to be like an opinion piece or a political thing. This is supposed to be but I needed to impart that very down-to-earth, sane, practical experience advice that I have been through, just to warn other people. Literally, just to warn others. So, but especially women out there, and homeless, and minorities, anybody on the rainbow spectrum, anyone of any, with any melanin in their skin, because you're going to get screwed over far worse than, it's just the truth, a rich white male. Period. So moving on to my near-death experiences, I've had many. The two biggest ones as of recent, I had one when I think I was 27 or so, when I gave blood. And now this is the interesting thing. I've had many near-death experiences before the age of 27, and I've had many near-death experiences throughout my life. And I even had one, recently during this, I can't say it, but flu epidemic. So yeah. And before the age of 34, which was my biggest near-death experience to date, biggest one to date, still is, even though I've had at least one other since then, it was nothing compared to the age of 34 one. All my near-death experiences before the age of 34 were negative. Now, I'll just say this, I was raised in Christianity. My parents were holy rollers, as I found out it's called. They actually went to a very Christian, if you want to call it that. What it was Christian occult church out in this place called El Reno, at a restaurant called the Red Roof Inn in Oklahoma. It was at the time. And this was in the 90s. I was 14 through 16 years old. And it was absolutely horrific. And I mean, they were horrible. My parents have always been horrifically abusive, and out of the blue, they decided to blame me and therefore exorcise me of demons, quote unquote, because they had fallen into bankruptcy. My mother being, at the time, she diagnosed herself as being a shopaholic. Nowadays, it's actually called a hoarder. Thankfully, it's finally been recognized by the mental health community. My dad, who is a PTSD, bipolar riddled Vietnam veteran, yes, he's in his 80s. Both my parents are in their 80s. And he's very unmedicated, and he absolutely refused any diagnoses that anyone tried to give him over his lifetime. According to him, he's always been fine, and everyone else around him has been very, very, according to him, evil and bad and demonic and mentally ill. I mean, he's abusive. Let's just leave it at that. So I've had many absolutely horrific near-death experiences, and I chalked it up finally to the absolutely extremely abusive family environment that I was raised in, and that makes sense. And when your brain is overclocked to watching out for anything that is a threat to you, and constantly in vigilant, just beyond hyper vigilant, trying to protect yourself. Yeah. You're gonna, when you have near-death experiences and anything spiritual, it's obviously gonna be bad. But that doesn't make it any less worse, and that doesn't make it any less potent or poignant or horrific. And so before the age of 34, the largest near-death experience that I could even now recall, now with all these memory problems that I'm having, I ended up giving blood at the age of 27, and I didn't know that I had thrombocytopenia, and I nearly passed out driving home, and then I did pass out laying on the bed that I was on. And literally what ended up happening is that my bed was up against a white wall, a completely and totally white wall. And the wall went from white to black. The whole thing just went totally black. And the blackness itself, and I ended up hearing, it was kind of like your ears ringing, but the ringing got louder and louder and louder. And the ringing ended up turning into, you know how your ears ring and they scream and they squeal, kind of like air being let out of a balloon, when you pinch the neck real tight, and just air being let out of an air compressor. And, it went from that to voices of human beings, specifically females, screaming. And the wall ended up, it ended up going completely black, 100% like sucking void sort of black. And the wall ended up forming into kind of like hands, and it was initially like long tendrils coming out of the wall, but it wasn't tendrils, these were claws, and long claws coming out of the wall, and that formed into these long claw, like the fingers. They ended up forming into long fingers, but the fingers were made out of nothing but claw. And then there was like the palm of the hand, and I started almost seeing faces. And it's so difficult to explain this, because this is either in the ethereal realm, or it was, what I took it as, a complete and total hallucination. But it was so frightening and so rattling that I couldn't take it as an actual hallucination, So I can't help but laugh at it now. But literally this white wall went completely black, sucking void black, and the blackness formed into banshees. I don't know how else to call it or describe it. It ended up forming into screaming banshees, and they ended up sucking. It's like my orientation of, you can tell where you are in space. My orientation, I remember seeing it kind of flip down or turn down, and then I started getting pulled down into this darkness that was forming into banshees more and more. And these banshees, and I have to admit, I was in horrific full body pain at the time because of the neurological ailment that I had. So, yeah, I was just surrounded by banshees. And the frightening thing is that later on, I ended up finally looking up banshees, and I ended up finding out that supposedly they come around and they end up drawing people down into them who are in extreme and significant physical pain. Like some of the worst pain ever. And yeah, that would fit the state that I was in, because I ended up getting some sort of neurological problem where I was constantly frigid cold. I couldn't warm up. I couldn't keep anything in my body. I was constantly, sorry, but I'm going to say I was constantly having diarrhea. I was literally dying from it, which at the time I ended up finding out was colon cancer. I'm not even going to get into it. And my family was abusing me horrifically, absolutely horrifically. And there were people outside my family who were sexually abusing me, because I was wanting love, and they weren't giving it to me either, but they instead were doing horrific things to me. But I'm not even going to get into that one. But it was really, really bad. And so I had this near-death experience. at the age of 27, where I was nearly sucked into, what I knew to be as hell. And despite the fact that my parents had, baptized me a million times over in actual, swimming pools and everything, despite the fact, and this was at churches, all over the country, I'm not even going to name all the places. It was incredible. California, Minnesota, Texas, you name it. If there was a baptism going on, they would baptize me. They would baptize all three of us kids. There was me and two other siblings. And the interesting part is that my siblings are extremely abusive themselves now. I'm the only one who turned out not to be abusive out of the whole pack, and yet I'm the one that was picked on the most in the family. But I'm also the oldest, other than my youngest brother, who was picked on the most until a certain point in which they just stopped picking on him. I don't know why, but me, they just continued to pick on me. I'm just seen as the evil one, the black sheep. I don't know why. So now I actually attribute, believe it or not, I'm ruled by Saturn and Neptune, which actually makes sense. Why Neptune makes it so that no one believes me, and Neptune is always the planet that is seen as the liar, but it's not a liar. It's actually just being misunderstood by human beings. It literally means the ocean, and underneath the ocean, and that which is mysterious and misunderstood and not believed. And that has been me in my life so far. And I'm also ruled by Saturn, which is the planet of silence, destruction, death. Pluto is also the planet of death, but Saturn is well and far more anciently known as the planet of death, the planet of poverty, of homelessness, all of these things which line up with me and myself and my life. So, and if you want a description of Saturn, look at me in my life. Literally, if you want a description of Neptune, look at me in my life. Where you're constantly pointing out the truth and everyone fights against you. No one believes you. So that is the definition of Neptune right there. So anyway, moving on, just to try to keep this video a little shorter than it is so far. So I had a near-death experience, despite being baptized, and I was also baptized in the Holy Spirit. I was knocked over by the power of the Holy Spirit over and over and over again, and not just as a child, in my teenage years and even in my early 20s, because these Christian people and families, they have full control over their children, and they are not about to let go, male or female. They don't care. You are going to do as they say. You're going to vote as they say. You're going to act as they say, and you're going to believe as they say, and you don't have a choice, and they threaten you with hell. They threaten you with Satan and demons. And from my experiences, what I was having, being so physically ill and having near-death experiences like this, horrific things, constantly feeling the touch of death and the hand of death. And Saturn is known as death, which lines up with me again. There you go. So I had, not only were my parents forcing this on me and the entire southern community, in Oklahoma, Texas, what have you, even in northern places and, like Northern California, whatnot, it doesn't matter. Christianity is everywhere throughout the U.S. and you just have to find it, It's kind of like Scientology. You think that it's not there, and I just recently found out that there's a massive Scientology complex in Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is so anti any other religion, it's incredible. They just automatically arrest people who aren't Christian and who aren't a very specific type of Christianity that they want you to be. Texas has like bubbles, but Oklahoma, the whole state is one bubble. And I was absolutely flabbergasted when I found out that there is a massive Scientology building, out in the boondocks in Oklahoma. So, yeah, that just brain explode right there. So, yeah, so I was definitely a born again Christian. I had Jesus Christ in my heart, and I was, covered in Jesus Christ's blood. And all the Christian people want to say, oh, you weren't really a Christian, that's why you're going to hell, that's why you're being dragged to hell, all this stuff. And my answer to that, and this is the truth, my answer is that I found out that my brother was actually a Satanist and actually sacrificing me to Satan. So, and he has actually sacrificed my mother to Satan. He has actually sacrificed Interestingly enough, he's on my dad's side. He hasn't sacrificed my dad to Satan, but oddly enough, and thankfully my brother managed to get away from all the Christianity stuff. I don't know how. I don't know how he managed to pull that off. Mom did end up saying to me eventually here that when she gave him his Bible and, offered Christianity to him, she said that he just did not take it, and he would not take it, and he absolutely refused to read his Bible. He would not touch that thing. And this was when he was a little kid. So the idea of you're chosen before your life, I think that can very much be the truth. But I think the majority of people are not chosen before their life, such as my brother was. He came out different. Even my sister said, there's something wrong with him when he was born. But maybe it was because of that. Maybe it was because, there's some past remembered life that he decided, no, I'm not going to go with anything except for what I was before this life, But he's turned out not to be such a great fellow himself, so. But he wasn't raised right. Both my parents were exceedingly abusive. Exceedingly abusive. But my brother and sister become that too. But, I'm glad that I'm putting this out there because at least this will jog my memory. Hopefully this will give me enough information to jog my memory. Just for myself personally. So now, on to the main thing. I was definitely a Christian. I had Jesus Christ in my heart. My heart and soul was covered in Jesus Christ's blood. I had Jesus Christ in my heart and soul. I was baptized by the Holy Spirit. I fell under the power of the Holy Spirit many times over. I was baptized physically with water, by the Holy Spirit, by preachers and priests and all of it, all throughout my life, And despite that, I was having horrific near-death experiences where I was being dragged into hell. And then at the age of 34, on September 1st, 2014, I finally died. I want to say for the last time. Not actually. But I died. And as I always used to say, it could have been for 20 seconds. It could have been for 4 hours. Looking back, I ended up finding out because I was so sick. I was dying of dehydration because I had kidney disease. And that's all I knew. Turns out I actually had kidney cancer. I'm not going to go into any of it. And I will say this though. You know what? I guess I will go into it. I don't know how the heck I was cured. I'll say that right now. But when I crawled into my parents' room begging for help, because that's all I could do, and it took me quite a long time because my room at that time was at the other end of the house. It was literally on the other end. It was like a mother-in-law plan. I'm not even going to... I had to crawl into their bedroom at the other end of the house, and I begged to be taken to the ER at 4 a.m., somewhere in there, because everything was just swimming in my brain because my whole body was poisoned because my kidneys weren't working. And what ends up happening is that the poisons that your kidneys cannot filter out, it shuts down all your other organs. But and interesting, during that time, I remember sitting out back and watching mosquitoes bite into, this was like, 2 months before this happened. I remember sitting out back and watching mosquitoes bite into my skin, and over half of them fell over acting really, really drunk, and the other half literally fell over dead, and they would hit the floor. That is how poisoned my blood was because my kidneys weren't working anymore. They just weren't working. And they were not working less, they were not working less and less and less, or more and more and more, however you want to put that. And so what ended up happening is that September 1st, 2014, or, the date right before it, at 4 a.m., I crawled into my parents' room, begged them to bring me to the ER. The nurse, when we got there, she literally looked at me and said, this is, she let my parents know that this is the end. She's not, she's dead. When we got into the ER, all the doctor did was give me a water IV. And then he shot me full of I don't know what. And I want to make comments about that because I actually had a cousin. The same thing happened to my cousin, except he ended up dying not from kidney disease. He ended up dying from bad lungs because he was a 9/11 rescuer, and the medical staff actually gave him an OD dose and did him in too. So that's what ended up happening to me in this life. I was brought into the ER. They tried to OD me on I don't know what, and clearly it worked because I ended up passing away. Now, what ended up happening, I don't know. All I know is that they gave me, as far as I know, they gave me a water IV. They ended up giving me a massive shot of something that stopped me from talking, stopped me from moving. My parents ended up bringing me home, laid me down on my bed. And after that, in the evening, I know it was the evening sometime, so from 4 a.m. to about 10 p.m., because my mom would make dinner for my brother who was working like the twilight shift. And he absolutely demanded a massive dinner because he was, working at UPS at the time. He was loading boxes and whatnot. But he was very mean about it. He demanded a massive dinner. And so she was making spaghetti, with the meatballs and the bread and all of it, working her ass off doing it. And she was having to do it alone. And I couldn't move. I literally couldn't move. But anyway, there's lots of trauma involved with this because while this was going on, my family knew I was sick. They knew I was extremely sick, but they didn't. My mom has always been a big, like Abraham Hicks type of denier, way before Abraham Hicks and The Secret ever existed. She's a real, they call him a Pollyanna. That's an old term that I don't understand at all. She denies everything that she doesn't like, that anything that's unhappy, that's depressing, that's angry. She just denies it. I mean, my dad has beaten the flying fuck out of her, and she has absolutely denied it while she's been broken. And it's been horrible, big old bruises and she just, broken bones and shit. And she just denies it, he didn't do anything and all this crap, he loves you, and then she gets angry at me for pointing out that maybe, you should protect yourself, leave even just for a few minutes, and I'm the bad guy, and I get really in big trouble with her for even suggesting that he isn't good, that he's the bad guy. So yeah, my family brought me to the ER. The doctor literally said, don't bring her back here, because I didn't have insurance at the time because I was sick and I hadn't been able to work in a while, because before that, my back had been broken by a chiropractor 4 years before, which is a totally different thing. I'm not even going to get into. But, so I didn't have any money to pay the medical bills, and the ER doctor literally said, don't ever bring her back here again. Bring her to her family care physician. He literally stood at the foot of my bed, looked right in my eyes and said that to my parents. And, as for all these quacks, what they do is they don't give you any rhyme or reason or any help or anything about what's going on. And in fact, the last time my mom was at, and I'm going to call this out, what is it? It's I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think it's the same place. It was called Baptist Integris at the time, and it was in Oklahoma City. Baptist Integris. And I know that the last time that my mom went there, which wasn't that long ago, it was like 6 months ago or something. Because now I'm back because my mom is on her way out, and now I'm having to take care of her full time. But the last time she was there, they didn't even give her an IV. And the guy from the ambulance ended up having to take care of her. So there you go. So don't go to Baptist. And I actually found out from my nursing class that I took at the college in Oklahoma that Baptist Integris used to be Baptist and it lost its medical license. And so instead of renewing its medical license, doing what it should have done and renewing its medical license, it decided to operate under some other hospital called Integris. And I guess Integris just bought them out full boat now. So, but that doesn't mean that they ever regained their medical license or did what they were supposed to do to get that medical license back. And every hospital is supposed to have their medical license hanging in the front doors, right where the front doors are, of definitely their ER, but anywhere where you walk into the hospital. And it's supposed to have, from inspection, a stamp of approval for the date of that year. If that hospital does not have a stamp of inspection that is up to date, then walk out. Walk out, walk out. And so that is another very important thing that I must tell everyone here. Walk the fuck out. If it doesn't have that, there are so many important things that patients aren't being told that need to be told to them and that they don't know. That they just do not know, that they should know. And that is a big one right there. People do not know it and they're not being told, and that is dangerous and that is bad. So, moving on. So yeah, when I passed away, I don't know what time, and apparently it was longer than 12 hours. Looking back on it now and calculating it, I'm actually shocked and really upset about how long it was that I was actually dead. I had died. What ended up happening is nothing happened. That's the thing. There was no Jesus, there was no angels, there was no heaven. But interestingly enough, there was no Satan, there was no devil, there was no demons, there was no banshees, there was no monsters, there was no hell, there was no fire, there was no brimstone. There was no, the only torture that I had was the horrific torture of kidney disease in my own body. And still, even though all of my, and what ended up happening is that all my muscles, it felt like, now at the very end, it felt like all of my muscles tensed up to a degree that is beyond anything that I can explain or describe. And it felt like I was trying to do aerobics, running at top speed, uphill, with full body, like a workout gym, 2 billion pound weights on me. I was trying to go literally at a 90-degree vertical angle directly up, fighting all of these weights on me, and all my muscles were tense, and I was constantly tense in a constant and continuous heaving, and I was burning hot, beyond burning hot. I wasn't sweating at all. My eyes were completely dry. My mouth was completely dry. And, I was in beyond horrific pain from my kidneys that engulfed the entirety of my body, but everything else in my body was in horrific pain. My stomach, my guts, my muscles, every last muscle, every last cell. I could feel every last cell in my body, and it was in horrific pain. And then I could tell when I died, and all of my muscles in my body, even though they felt tense and felt tight, they all went lax. And then I couldn't move my eyeballs, and everything went fuzzy in my sight. Everything went completely fuzzy, and the light got a whole lot brighter because the muscles in my eyeballs completely relaxed and went dilated. So the light in my room got really bright.